Thank you, Madam Speaker. B626.
Madam Speaker, since 2015, government is pursuing a policy of a more liberal approach to open air access on the basis of bilateral agreements in order to promote connectivity with a view to transforming Mauritius into a regional aviation and tourism hub, whilst ensuring fair and equal opportunities for the development and growth of the national carrier Air Mauritius Limited. Air services between Mauritius and other countries are established on the basis of bilateral air services agreements. The bilateral air services agreement is a framework which lays down the rules for the operation of scheduled air services in and out of Mauritius, and it is signed at government level, following negotiations between the two contracting parties and not between airlines. The bilateral air services agreement is also a standard document which makes provision inter alia for air traffic rights, capacity entitlement, frequency of services, route schedules, air safety and security issues, as well as the conditions to be fulfilled by airlines to qualify for designation. Once a bilateral air services agreement is concluded, it is incumbent upon each contracting party to designate its airline or airlines to operate scheduled services on the specified route. Madam Speaker, the information requested by the Honourable Member is being compiled and will be placed in the library.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. Answering to PQ, the Minister of Tourism has criticized the lack of air capacity as a reason for a fall in tourism, arrival of tourism in Mauritius. Would the Honourable Prime Minister tell us, in view of this statement made by the Minister of Tourism, what has his ministry done in terms of trying to conclude bilateral air services agreements?
Well, I can recall what the Honourable Minister of Tourism has said, and specifically with regard to the period where Emirates Airlines had reduced its number of flights that was serving Mauritius, one, and secondly, Air Mauritius also had stopped serving a number of destinations because they thought that, not they thought, because they found out that it was not profitable and that in the future probably it would still not be profitable. So when you take into account the number of seats that was not then available, obviously it had an impact on the industry here. But I am also told that, well, the policy has been that it has resulted in an increase also in seat capacity for some time from 1.8 million in 2014 to 2.4 million in 2018. But of course, it is a policy of government, as I have stated, to see to it that we can obviously accommodate more airline to service our destination, but also take into consideration the interest not only of the tourism industry, but also of Air Mauritius.
There has been repeated requests from Qatar to service Mauritius, and each time the government has turned it down. So may I know from the Honourable Prime Minister whether the reason for turning down requests from Qatar was genuine commercial reasons, or has there been any pressure from the Emirates or Saudi Arabia?
Well, no, I must say, no decision has been taken. It is true that they have requested to fly to Mauritius since quite some time. I must say it is not straightforward as deciding yes or no. It is quite complex because we do have an agreement. Mauritius has an agreement with Emirates Airline. I can say to the House that Etihad also has shown interest, and that is also quite complex because with regard to Etihads, we have to negotiate with the UAE, and Emirates, Dubai, forming part of the UAE, makes it even more complicated. And with Qatar, also we have to see to it that there is a market, and that market, well, is now being serviced by mainly, you have Air Mauritius, you have Emirates, you have Turkish Airlines, which is, of course, now regularly coming to Mauritius, and you have Saudia, which has recently, and they want to increase their, I think, 3 flights per week, free. So, so we have to be careful. I'm not saying that we have already taken a decision to turn down, but I mean, we have to see how the market will evolve, how the situation will evolve, and eventually probably take a decision.
B647.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, to have acceded to my request. Madam Speaker, I wish to inform the House that the FinTech and Innovation-Driven Regulatory Committee was set up in January 2018 to assist in paving the way for appropriate regulatory frameworks for encouraging and supporting the development of FinTech in Mauritius. In this respect, the committee had the responsibility to assess the current regulatory setup with respect to FinTech and innovation-driven financial services regulations in Mauritius and make recommendations on the need to introduce new sets of regulations for FinTech and innovation. B, identify priority areas within the regulatory space of FinTech activities. And C, advise on the drafting of regulations and guidelines by segment of activities and how Mauritius needs to adapt itself for the benefit of its financial services sector. Madam Speaker, I am informed that the committee has already completed its assignment and handed over its report to the Financial Services Commission on 18th May 2018. Madam Speaker, with regard to Part A of the question, I wish to inform the Honourable Member that I had already provided the information in my reply to Parliamentary Question B/1125 at the sitting of the 27th November 2018. With respect to Part A1 of the question, I wish to reiterate that the members of the FinTech and Innovation-Driven Regulatory Committee were not remunerated for either their participation in the meetings of the committee or for the drafting and producing of the report. However, I am advised that the Financial Services Commission provided secretarial services to the committee and also met the expenses regarding the air tickets and accommodation of the chairman and members for attending meetings of the committee. As regards Part A2 of the question, as I stated in my reply to PQB/1125, the committee met on 3 occasions. The first meeting was held in Mauritius, and the cost of the air tickets and accommodation amounted to 761,742 rupees. Subsequently, 2 meetings were held in London, primarily in view of the respective availabilities of the international members. The costs for the second and third meetings of the committee amounted to 1,274,571 rupees and 1,137,246 rupees, respectively. Madam Speaker, with regard to Part B of the question, I am informed that after its third meeting, the committee finalized its report entitled Mauritius, Road for a Regional FinTech Hub, which was subsequently handed over to the Commission. The report, as I mentioned earlier in my reply, was meant to be a working document to guide the Financial Services Commission on appropriate regulatory frameworks for FinTech in Mauritius. However, the findings of the report were disseminated during a two-day workshop organized by the Financial Services Commission on the 19th and 20th September 2018. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Minister mentioned that the report has been submitted as far back as May of last year. 1 year later, may I know from the Honourable Minister, why hasn't been any legislative framework to implement the recommendation of the report?
Madam Speaker, I think this report was used as a basis to come up with a regulatory sandbox license. This is being used right now to process application at the level of the EDB.
The regulatory sandbox has been there before the report has been committed. In fact, there is changes with respect to peer-to-peer. My question is, today, Mauritius is losing out because other countries, there's a race to regulate cryptocurrencies and fintech services. So may I know from the Honourable Minister whether there is any team right now at the level of the Financial Services Commission really looking into the possibility of having a proper legislation as opposed to the regulatory sandbox to regulate fintech services?
Yes, Madam Speaker, positive. Mrs. Loretta Joseph is actually a part-time consultant working with the Financial Services Commission, advising on the matters mentioned by the Honourable Member. And as far as cryptocurrency is concerned, I'm aware that the Financial Services Commission have already disseminated directives as to the recognition of crypto assets as a recognized assets. So I think the process is on. In fact, there have been several applications which have been made by potential operators to be licensed for these kind of activities. And I'm satisfied that this is ongoing, and we are making the most of the opportunities in this field.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The SME employment scheme was announced in last year's budget, and it was targeting 1,000 graduates, and an amount of 350 million rupees were earmarked. I've just heard from the Honourable Minister that not even 25 million has been disbursed and less than 250 people. So may I know from the Honourable Minister, why has this not been a success?
Well, as I said earlier, there is a mismatch between what is required by the SME and also what is available from the part of the graduate itself. And quite often, there is, as I said, mismatch, and the entrepreneur cannot find the graduate that he would like to have. And it also happened that after 1 or 2 months, the graduate leaves the enterprise because he is not satisfied with the work environment, with the logistics available, etc.
Is the Honourable Minister aware of the malpractices and fraud relating to SME employment scheme, whereby companies who are registered less than 6 months are getting employees, whereby people, there was supposed to be only one graduate per firm. There are companies which have more than one graduate, and there was supposed to be only youth being targeted. There is, according to my information, even someone who's above 50-year-old who is on VRS from DBM who is benefiting from this scheme.
Yes, the Honourable Member is right. This targets youth, unemployed youth, graduate. If the Honourable Member has any information, he can pass on to me, and I can assure the Honourable Member that investigation can be done at the level of my ministry and SME Mauritius as well.
Give a copy of the information to my friend. But is the Honourable Minister aware that there is currently allegation that the HR manager of SME Mauritius has favoured the training of his son under this scheme, a blatant case of conflict of interest?
I am aware of that case, but in fact, there was one entrepreneur named Focustra Limited who wanted to have one graduate, and 3 names were submitted to that entrepreneur, including the one which is the Honourable Member has just mentioned, And the interview was done at the level of the entrepreneur, not SME Mauritius. And the entrepreneur chose to have the services of the said person who happened to be the son of the HR director.
The Honourable Minister has just mentioned the Foreign Technical Assistance Scheme, the Madhubani painting and banana fiber courses. I know from the Honourable Minister, how much funds have been disbursed for these foreign technical assistance, and how many people attended these courses? Because according to my information, there were very, very few people who showed any interest in those courses.
Yeah, very few, the Honourable Member is right, because we have trained the trainers, in fact. Now the trainers have applied to get the training certificate with MQA. As for the funds disbursed for this specific, I don't have, I can have this information supplied later.
Yes, B648.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I am in the Institute for Judicial and Legal Studies Act was enacted as far back as 2011, and the Act came into force on 1st of October 2011. Section 4D of the IJLS Act provided at the time as follows: 4D, as the object of the Institute shall be to promote transparency and consistency in the sentencing of offenders and the award of civil damages by making recommendations to the Chief Justice for the issue of guidelines, unquote. As the House is aware, in 2018, government introduced legislation in this House to amend the said IJLS Act. The new sections 4 and 4A of the IJLS Act now read as follows. Section 4, object of the Institute. The object of the Institute shall be to, Part D, promote transparency and consistency in the sentencing of offenders and the award of civil damages by making recommendations annually to the Chief Justice for the issue of guidelines, end of quote. This new section has come into effect since 15th of November last year. Madam Speaker, a new section 4A has been added to the IJLS Act, which reads as follows, I quote, sentencing guidelines and award of civil damages. The board shall, within 6 months of the coming into operation of this section, make recommendations to the Chief Justice to give effect to its object under section 4D, unquote. This section has come into effect as well on the 15th of November last year. Madam Speaker, I am informed by the chairperson of the IJLS that with regards to the sentencing of offenders and the award of civil damages, guidelines are under discussion with the Chief Justice. I am further informed by the Honourable Master and Registrar that the chairperson of the board of the IJLS has verbally conveyed to the Chief Justice the difficulties of the board in relation to its functions and under section 4D and 4A of the Act as amended. If I have to give a straightforward answer to the question put, until now there have been no guidelines which have been issued.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last year, the law was amended, as the Honourable Attorney General stated, to give a delay of 6 months for the Board of IJLS to provide these guidelines. I know from the Honourable Attorney General, before this bill was presented, debated and voted in this House, did his office had contact with the IJLS to find out whether this was a realistic time frame, 6 months from the coming into force of the Act?
I will have to refer the Honourable Member to the debates which took place in this House at the time the Act was being amended. I will leave it as that. Otherwise, I will have to go back to what was debated in the House during in the debates in 2018.
The Honourable Attorney General satisfied that the IGLS has the proper resources and means today to conduct this, to provide the recommendation on sentencing guidelines and on award of damages?
They have the necessary resources. If ever that institute requires further assistance, it is for the institute to make the necessary requests to the appropriate authorities, and why not to my office?
From the Honourable Minister, does he find it normal that someone who has already been found guilty, we're not talking about presumption of innocence here, we're not talking about someone on bail, someone who has already been found guilty of an offence, be heading an important institution like the Maritime Training Academy?
Let me give an additional information to the Honourable Member. On 9 July 2019, the Independent Commission Against Corruption informed my ministry that the case against Dr. Babwa is still under appeal. So you understand the meaning. It is still under appeal.
Speaker, the Honourable Minister has mentioned that he has held a discussion with Sokovia. May I know from the Honourable Minister whether, before this committee is going to fix the price, whether they will also hear representation from other importers and local breeders, because they also sell those cattle for Idulata.
I must say that we didn't have any discussion with Sokovia as at now. In fact, the Ministerial Committee is going to meet, then we will meet Sokovia, who is a main importer, where there are no other parties that have imported, so it's only Sokovia that is concerned. No, concerning the local one, in fact, as you know very well, we don't fix the price for live cattle for the local cattle available. So it's only the imported one. And that's why we normally discuss with the importers. And in this case, we have only one importer, that is Sokovia Limited.